Hi class, this is enhancement theory number 5, and it is what we're going to go over in the screencast is lens correction. So what we're going to do is I have a sample file here, and we're going to go into development module to kind of talk about the few things you can do with lens correction. A couple things about lens correction is that what you see right here, for instance, to start out, is a picture that was taken with a 24mm using a 24 to 70mm f2.8 lens. This is using a Nikon ED glass lens and is one of those really expensive lenses. So, I mean, after you pay that much money for a lens, you would almost think that there shouldn't be no or any distortion in the image. However, we're still dealing with glass and physics and light transmission through multiple elements inside the lens in general, so obviously we're going to have issues like this. Now, what it really comes down to is that the more you pay for the lens, generally as a rule of thumb, the less of an issue with distortion you're going to have, because the glass are refined and they're processed much better. But anyway, there is a way to counteract that, and normally what we would do before in the days of Photoshop is we would take this picture in Photoshop and do some correction, which most of the time takes a lot of time and a lot of resources, and unless you really do architecture photography, you wouldn't think about doing something like that. Now, what happened is, since Lightroom 3, Adobe has built in a feature called lens correction right into Lightroom. So what we're going to do here is let's take a look at the lens correction panel in the development module. So a couple things we have here under lens corrections: we have the profile and we have the manual correction. So we can do profile and then the manual correction as well, where we can dial things independently. Well, we're going to focus first in this video is the profiling, and simply enough, if you have a picture, the easiest way to apply lens profile correction is to just click on this little checkbox right here called enable profile correction. Just check it, and boom, just like that, you can kind of see there the lines are now straight, there's no bowing. It just makes for a really great image, as you can kind of see in the sample. So I'm going to do a before. This is what it was before, this is after. You can kind of see some of the shift and changes. Because this was photographed with a wide angle lens, what we have here is a lot of lens barrel distortion. If I were to use a long focal length lens, such as a 70 to 200mm or something like that, the distortion I'm going to get the further as I zoom out more and more is that I'm going to get more and more pincushion distortion. So it's just something for us to see here. This is the before and after. A couple of other things to notice here is that you have the lens profile itself. It's built for multiple lens and camera combinations. So as you can kind of see here. The other thing too is that if your lens is not listed here, you can try to pick from the list whatever is closest related to your lens. There's a lot of lenses on here you can kind of see, and the list kind of keeps going on and on. Is pretty amazing right there. The other thing too, what we have here is on the bottom is just the profile. So what we have too is we can control and go in and manually control the amount of distortion. For example, the default value is at 100. We can take the distortion on out and we get the curving again, or we can actually add too much distortion and get the curving to go in the other direction. Simply reset it to 100, we'll get it back to the default value. Lastly is the vignetting. You can kind of see in the bottom corner here, if we start to vignette this, you're going to start to see that the picture is growing dark on the corners. And what vignetting really does is that it corrects for light fall off at the corner of the lens. Normally the picture would come in like this. What Lightroom does is that corrects it so that it looks bright, so that it has a uniform brightness or an even brightness throughout from the center to the edge of the image. So you can do that. Lastly, the one thing we're going to cover here is chromatic aberration under the lens profile. So let me go ahead and zoom in 2:1, and I'm going to zoom into this area right here. Now, we look on my screen right now. I'll just go a little further. Well, we kind of see with these two lines, vertical line running through the picture here, is we get this thing, this green line and this red line, almost red magenta line. We call this chromatic aberration. What happens is when lights gets transmitted through, or white light, which contains RGB colors, red, green, and blue, gets transmitted through the center of our lens. What we do is we have a uniform lines throughout. As you can kind of see here, the lights lines up perfectly. It doesn't create any color fringing at all. When we get to the edge of our image, what happens is the RGB light no longer lines up perfectly, and hence why we get this color fringing, or chromatic aberration is the proper term for it. Now, if we want to remove chromatic aberration, correction, what we would do is simply click on the remove chromatic aberration checkbox right there. And what I'm going to do is just check on that, and you can kind of simply see that once it's processed, all these color fringing are now pretty much gone. So it does a really good job. This is a before. You can kind of see there the red and the magenta line, and after. Before and after. Okay, works really great for architectural shot or for majority of photography as well. I mean, that's just something for us to look at. Alright, let's kind of go through here and talk about something else. So, with the lens correction tool, we also have the lens profile correction. And so what I'm going to do is take a look at this image. What I'm going to do first is kind of come and make sure enhance the image, make sure everything looks great before I continue to lecture on this picture. Okay, I think it looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do here is go to lens correction again, and I'm just simply going to enable profiles correction. If you can kind of see there, the black line here on the top, like the rooftop, gets a little bit straighter, a little bit less distortion in the building itself, and you can kind of see that. So it's really neat. I'm going to go ahead and enable chromatic aberration as well. So now what I'm going to do here is come into the manual correction. What's wrong with this picture is that the building is tipping over. And what I like to do here is correct for this. So I'm going to go into vertical transformation and simply dial backwards just to kind of correct and make sure that straight line is kind of straight. I'll go back a little bit. That's a little much. And boom, just like that, we're now able to correct our picture. Let's say if this picture requires some rotation, you can also go in and rotate the picture quite a bit as well, as you can kind of see there, to make sure the lines are straight. So that's kind of what we can do. Another thing that once we use the vertical or horizontal and transformation, we're going to see that we have this gray area. What it's really doing is that it's taking the plane of your picture and is drawing this line through the center. And what it's doing right there is that's pretty much just pivoting the top or the bottom out to correct for this kind of distortion. So what you have is a scrunching of the pixel in the bottom and also an expansion of pixel on the top, which causes you to lose pixel. Most of the time we don't want to see this gray area, so what we're going to click on is constrain crop, and it will just hide the gray area out like so, and now you have the final picture looking right there. Another picture going to show you, and for this one we're going to enable profile correction. You're going to notice like this straight black line here becoming straighter, so we're going to do that. As you can kind of see, this is before, after. It does a really good job at that. What we're going to do is remove chromatic aberration, and we'll go into manual correction here and dial the horizontal distortion so that this bus is now running parallel to the picture, if you can kind of see there. So you can kind of see it before and after. And trust me, I can tell you right now that there's no real good way of actually going out there and really learning about this other than playing with it. So choose your picture, take your pick, and really just experiment and play, because at any given point you can just simply come and double click on the word transform here and reset everything back to default. Cases and situations where a lens transformation would fail is something like this, where you have distortion on multiple axes for some pictures like this. So for instance, if I wanted to see this portion of the building right here, kind of straightforward, I can try to manipulate this by pulling the vertical distortion back so I can kind of correct for the front part. I'm looking at this part right here. The thing is that if the front's corrected, the back is still not corrected, so it doesn't work quite well. And the other thing too, what we're going to do is actually pull the horizontal distortion the other way. As you can kind of see here, we were able to somewhat get this picture looking straight. However, the distortion is quite great. You can kind of see in the people in general, it doesn't look really good at all. If you would honestly want that view from the beginning, the best thing to do was probably not to take it as an angle like that, and actually just turn straight towards the building and just capture the picture. If you need to tilt the camera up a little bit too, it will probably be a much easier correction that we're looking at here. Two more pictures here before we finish up. This is a Chicago skyline taken between a few buildings here. What I'm going to do is adjust the picture a little bit and pull in some shadows and set some whites and black points. Okay. Normal what we do. So for something like this, what I would go do is under lens correction again, go into profile. I'm going to enable lens profile correction as we have done throughout time so far. So we have done that. Okay, you can see very little of a little bit of change here in terms of stretching out the picture. Remove chromatic aberration. I'm sure if we actually zoom in, we probably will see some chromatic aberration on the side of the building here. You can kind of see these green lines coming up a little bit, so we'll click on that and you can kind of see how those green lines are now gone. So it's a really effective tool to do that. Let's go into manual correction here. What we're going to do is a vertical distortion correction or transformation. We got the picture of the building looking almost straight, but what we lose is, if you see in the beginning, there are two buildings on the side here that were at an angle that we totally lose. So it does crop into your picture quite a bit. Something to keep in mind will constrain crop right there. The last situation here where things fail and things doesn't work out anymore is, for example, a picture like this. Most of us think that, well, because we can do lens correction in such a manner now, we can literally come and correct for a picture like this automatically. Well, let's take a look here. If I pull the vertical distortion away, yeah, it corrects for the building, however, it crops the top out as well. This is probably a task where Photoshop would do a much better job at, and this picture probably deserves to be taken to Photoshop if you're going to do some kind of drastic transformation like that. Because in Photoshop, you can morph and manipulate the pixel much further than you can do in Lightroom. Just remember that everything that's done in Lightroom is based on just codes, little instruction sets on how to do something, and is not really pushing your pixels. So at any given point, if I come in again, double click on transformation here, I can double click and return everything back to default. So anyway, that's the lens correction tool in a nutshell. I hope you guys find this helpful.